Help! My husband is an overenthusiastic CEO who thinks he's in a romance novel. Silly story begins. Please like and subscribe. Act 1, The Marriage Deal. I never imagined my life would take this turn. Sophie Bennett, once the carefree daughter of a wealthy family, now standing at the altar of an extravagant wedding that might as well have been a business transaction. And the groom? Dominic Archer, the CEO of Archer Enterprises. A man whose cold, steel blue eyes could freeze hell over. I mean, who wouldn't want to marry that, right? Said no one ever. No, this wasn't some fairy tale romance, far from it. I wasn't exchanging vows with Dominic because of some passionate, whirlwind courtship. No, I was doing this for one reason: saving my family's company. The stakes were high. My father's empire was crumbling, and I had a choice: marry Dominic, and keep the lights on, or watch her legacy fade away like yesterday's social media trend. So, marriage it was. And the terms? Whoa, they were simple and, frankly, a little too cold to even feel like a marriage. But hey, when your options are limited, a business contract doesn't seem all that bad. Here were the rules: 1. Live separate lives. 2. Stay out of each other's business. 3. Maintain the facade of a loving couple for 6 months. 6 months. That was the plan. A brief stint of pretending to be madly in love, and I could walk away with my family's future intact. Easy, right? If you had asked me back then if I ever thought I'd actually enjoy this arrangement, I would have laughed. I thought of Dominic as the textbook businessman, intense, stoic, and about as emotional as a refrigerator. But here's the thing about expectations: they like to be obliterated by reality. For the first couple of months, things went as planned. We'd have the occasional dinner where we smiled for the cameras, exchanged a few polite words, and pretended we were the perfect couple. Public appearances, meetings, and more public appearances. Yawn, rinse, repeat. Separate lives? Check. No business in each other's business? Absolutely. The whole act was so mechanical, I almost forgot this was supposed to be my marriage. Then came the gala. You know, one of those events where the rich and powerful gather in a glittering sea of sequins and silk, exchanging pleasantries while pretending to care about charity auctions. What I didn't expect was that the night would be the start of my descent into absolute chaos. And who should walk back into my life at that exact moment? Aaron Clark. My ex. I hadn't seen Aaron in years. We'd parted ways amicably, well, as amicably as possible when your boyfriend moves halfway across the world to chase his dream job while you're stuck at home dealing with your father's financial disasters. I'd convinced myself I was over him. I mean, who wouldn't be? He was the kind of guy who thought expressing emotions was as unnecessary as wearing socks in summer. But the moment our eyes locked across that crowded ballroom, all those old feelings came flooding back. Oh no, my heart did that weird little flip-flop thing it hasn't done since college, and I swear the air around me grew hotter. But I couldn't just rush over and ask him how life had treated him. I was married, technically. The problem? I couldn't stop staring at Aaron. His smile, that cocky grin that used to drive me crazy in all the wrong ways, now seemed like a dangerous weapon aimed directly at my heart. And that's when I noticed Dominic, my husband, watching me. And not just watching, staring. Like, full-on glaring from across the room. It was as if he could sense my thoughts, my illicit thoughts about my ex, and his lips tightened in a way that made me wonder if he was going to snap in half from sheer willpower. His eyes narrowed to slits as if Aaron was the villain in a noir film, and he was the leading man about to deliver a monologue about justice. I tried to ignore it, tried to focus on the hors d'oeuvres, and how my heels were slowly destroying my soul with each step. But no, it was too late. Dominic had already decided. Let's go. He grabbed my hand, and I swear to God, he spun me around so fast I almost collided with a vase. I felt my pulse race. Maybe it was the drinks, maybe it was the fact that I hadn't expected any of this, but what came next sent me straight into a whirlwind of confusion. Without a word, he dragged me outside, away from the party, until we were standing under a canopy of twinkling lights, surrounded by the cool evening air. And that's when he did it. He twirled me. Twisted me in a full-on, dramatic ballroom spin. Now, to be clear, I'm no ballerina. I'm not the type of woman who swoons in the arms of a man and dreams of being swept off her feet. But Dominic Archer, brooding, icy cold CEO that he was, had decided this was the moment to channel his inner romantic hero. I should have laughed. I should have pulled away and told him he was being ridiculous. But there I was, spinning under the moonlight like a character in a cheesy romance movie, staring up at him as though this was completely normal. Is this a game to you? I managed to choke out, finally finding my voice as I was spun one last time and held in his arms. It's not a game, Sophie, he said, his voice low and intense. I don't like sharing what's mine. A shiver ran down my spine. Wait, what did he mean by that? Was he territorial? Over me? Before I could process it, Dominic leaned down, his lips brushing my ear. I don't like seeing you look at him. He's in the past. I am the future. I froze. What was happening? Act 2. The CEO with a secret obsession. I don't know how to explain it, but something in Dominic snapped that night. Something in me snapped too. 1 minute, we were just two strangers playing the part of a married couple. The next, I was caught in the middle of a storm, unsure whether to be flattered by the intensity of his attention or terrified by the depths of his sudden possessiveness. It wasn't like we'd been building some kind of passionate connection. It wasn't even that I was particularly attracted to him in a conventional sense. Well, sure, he was undeniably attractive, tall, with those broad shoulders that made him look like he could take on the world, his sharp jawline, and his ice-cold eyes that never seemed to soften. But it was always so businesslike, clinical, professional. But now it was something else entirely. It all started at the gala. A casual spin on the dance floor, and suddenly, I was in too deep. My feet barely touched the ground as he gripped my waist with a surprising force and twirled me under the lights, his movements graceful and assured. He did it with such precision, like he'd practiced it 1,000 times. My breath caught in my throat. There was something so deliberate about it. The music swirled around us like a soundtrack to the moment, and Dominic's eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, held a fire in them that I'd never seen before. He wasn't just dancing. He was performing, and I was his leading lady. I should have pulled away. I should have asked him what he was doing, told him to cut the drama and stick to the rules. But instead, I found myself breathless, unsure whether I was playing along or being dragged into a fantasy I wasn't prepared for. I didn't want to be here, but somehow I was. And then, it escalated. After the gala, things started shifting. I'd find Dominic watching me with an intensity that felt borderline predatory, like he was waiting for something. And then came the monologues. Oh God, the monologues. I had no idea how or why he thought it was okay to talk to himself like this, out loud. But one night, I was walking past his study when I heard him. I swear, I almost turned around and walked straight out of the house. But my curiosity got the better of me. Wife, he muttered, his voice thick with something dark and possessive. Stop looking at him. He is the past. I am the future. I blinked, frozen in place. Wife? The future? Was he talking about me? And who the hell was he? I peeked around the corner, just in time to hear more. If I pin her against the wall right now, will she swoon? Wait. Was he serious? My stomach twisted in a knot. This was too much. I had to be hearing things. This wasn't my husband. This was some madman channeling a romance novel character. I stayed hidden behind the door, heart racing, while he continued to speak, think, out loud. Does my suit make me look more like the cold, dominant CEO she secretly desires? I was a breath away from bursting into the room and demanding answers. What was he talking about? Was he trying to role-play? The absurdity of it hit me in a flood of realization. Dominic was trying to live out the plots of the romance novels I'd always rolled my eyes at, the same ones I'd found so utterly ridiculous, I'd never bothered to read a single one. What kind of man read that kind of fiction? And why was he clearly enjoying it so much? It was almost comical? Almost. But there was something about the way he spoke, so confidently, so sure of his place in this imagined world, that made my blood run cold. He was lost in it, completely immersed. Later that night, I confronted him. Part of me wanted to laugh. The other part wanted to throttle him. He didn't even look surprised when I burst into his office, hands on my hips, demanding an explanation. He simply looked up from his desk, completely unfazed, as if being caught mid-monologue was a regular occurrence for him. I started, have some serious explaining to do. He merely raised an eyebrow and leaned back in his chair, his smirk almost knowing. What are you talking about? I hissed, talking to yourself like a character from one of those ridiculous billionaire romance novels. Pinning me against a wall? Swooning? Are you trying to live out some fantasy? Well, that, he said with a shrug. It's a little something I've been reading. Reading? I repeated, my voice rising. What exactly have you been reading? He didn't even blink. Billionaire romance novels? A beat of silence passed as I tried to process the absurdity of it all. Are you telling me you've been reading those books? Yes, he answered, completely matter of fact. They're quite instructional. I stood there, stunned, as the pieces fell into place. He wasn't just acting weird. He was actively modeling himself after the kind of men who populated the pages of those over-the-top books. The cold, mysterious CEO who slowly falls in love with the one woman he's destined to be with. The kind of man who would never let another man look at his wife, who would tear down the walls of her resistance with an unexpected gesture of passion. And somehow, he was pulling it off. Wait, I said, rubbing my temples, trying to make sense of it. You're trying to be the hero in a romance novel? The alpha male? The, what? The man who's so obsessed with his wife that he's willing to storm into the room and declare his territory. Dominic smiled, a glint in his eye that made me wonder if I was losing my mind. Exactly. I was speechless. But the kicker? He seemed to enjoy it, no, thrive on it. Like this whole ridiculous act was giving him some kind of twisted satisfaction. And here I was, stuck in a marriage I'd entered as a means to save my family's company. Now, tangled in a web of dramatic, absurd romance tropes that I couldn't seem to escape. And you know what? The worst part? I couldn't help but wonder, did I actually like it? I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure of anything anymore. But one thing was for certain, Dominic Archer, my cold, emotionless husband, was becoming something entirely different. Something unexpected? And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't going to be as easy as I thought to walk away from this ridiculous, over-the-top, romance novel of a marriage. Act 3. The ex, the foster sister, and the CEO showdown, and that's when Mia entered the picture. Mia. Dominic's foster sister? She'd always been, well, complicated. The kind of woman who didn't say much, but when she did, it was loaded with 1,000 hidden meanings. And of course, rumors followed her like a shadow. I'd heard the whispers about her, and Dominic, a special bond that always made my stomach twist in uncomfortable ways. But the plot thickened when Mia seemed invested in my marriage. More specifically in making sure Dominic and I were a real couple, as if she could see something no one else could. Or maybe she just loved a good dramatic soap opera, because let's face it, this whole thing was turning into one. She'd show up at random times, just when I thought things were settling down, with that infuriatingly cryptic smile of hers. You two are perfect for each other, she'd say, as if she had some secret knowledge about the future. She's the one who will make him happy, Mia said one afternoon, with the kind of smug certainty that made me question if she was secretly reading my life from a book. There was something about the way she said it, like a matchmaker, a character in her own love story. Except I didn't exactly feel like the heroine in her carefully crafted narrative. More like an accidental supporting character who just happened to wander onto the page. But things weren't just about Mia and her strange, matchmaking ways. No, things got a whole lot messier when Aaron Clark, my ex, decided to make a grand return. He showed up at my office one morning, looking like he'd just walked out of some romantic drama. With that I regret everything looked plastered all over his face. He was charming as always, all sweet words and carefully rehearsed regret. He was sorry he'd made a mistake leaving me for his career. He was now ready to commit, to fix what he'd ruined. Great, just what I needed. Another complication? But of course Dominic, my charming husband, who was still riding high on his CEO role-playing fantasy, was not having it. He'd overheard Aaron's attempt at redemption from the doorway of my office, and I'll tell you this, that was when things went from zero to full-on ridiculous. Before I could even open my mouth to defuse the situation, Dominic barged in, eyes flashing with a fiery intensity that made Aaron freeze mid-sentence. You made a mistake, Dominic growled, stepping forward like he was about to deliver some epic monologue. I'll show you a mistake. What happened next was so ridiculous, so over the top. I still have trouble believing it. Dominic grabbed Aaron by the collar, lifting him off the ground with one hand like a rag doll. My mouth hung open in disbelief as I watched my husband, this supposedly business-minded man, slam Aaron's back against the wall. With a grunt of frustration, Dominic shoved harder, and bam, I heard it, a sickening crack. That's right, Dominic broke Aaron's ribs. In my office? In front of me. Aaron wheezed, looking like he was half in shock, half in pain, while Dominic stood there, practically radiating with some misguided sense of triumph. It was like he thought he was saving me by making a very public display of dominance. I was mortified. And, okay, a little impressed. The man had strength. I'll give him that. But seriously? We don't do this in real life, Dominic. Are you insane? I shrieked, rushing to Aaron's side. You can't just, oh, I can, Dominic said smoothly, as if he'd just completed a transaction, his hands adjusting his suit. And I did. He turned to me, a gleam in his eyes. I don't share what's mine, Sophie. Not even with him. I stared at him, not sure whether to laugh or cry. We're not in a romance novel, Dominic. This isn't a showdown. You say that now, but you'll come around, wife, he said, a small, almost smug smile tugging at the corner of his lips. I didn't even know what to do with that. The man had broken my ex's ribs, and now he was acting like it was just a normal Tuesday. But as if that wasn't enough, Dominic wasn't finished with his brand of over-the-top protection. No. He had one more thing planned, and this one was even more absurd. Later that night, after Aaron had been carted off to the hospital with a few broken ribs and a bruised ego, thanks to Dominic's very effective CEO techniques, Dominic showed up at home, looking like the victorious hero in one of those insufferable romance novels he'd been reading. I was just about to climb into bed when Dominic, my husband, burst into the room, a dangerous glint in his eyes. A true CEO never lets his woman sleep alone, he declared before I could even protest. I gaped at him. Excuse me? You heard me. He grinned, that ridiculous grin of his, and before I could say another word, he climbed into the bed beside me, pulling the covers up like he belonged there. You're insane, I gasped, my face flushing red. I told you, I don't. This is the forced proximity trope, wife, he said, cutting me off with a knowing smile. You just have to accept it? I don't have to accept anything, I nearly shouted, but he just gave me that devilish grin, and rolled over like we were going to have a totally normal night's sleep after his public display of alpha male dominance. I was left sitting there, half exasperated, half terrified. This was definitely not how I imagined spending my nights in a fake marriage. But here we were. Dominic Archer, the man who thought he was starring in a romance novel, and me, his increasingly baffled and slightly amused wife, left to wonder, was I really stuck in this insane plot, or was I somehow enjoying it? All I knew was one thing. At this point, I wasn't sure which part of my life was the real story anymore. It was getting harder to tell. Act 4, the truth comes out. It happened on a Tuesday? Of course it did. Why wouldn't my life continue to follow the script of a wild, dramatic romance novel? We'd just gotten back from an utterly absurd gala, where Dominic had, yet again, decided to pull me into the spotlight with one of his signature twirls that made everyone in the room stare, as if we were the stars of the show, and they were all lucky enough to witness our very public love story. Honestly, at this point, I was convinced he believed he was in a live-action romance novel, starring himself. But that night, things took a turn. Not the Dominic twirls me around for the time turn. No, this was more serious. We were in the privacy of our ridiculously luxurious home, the kind of place where everything has velvet and gold trim, and the pillows probably cost more than my last paycheck. When Dominic sat me down, looking unusually serious, I thought, okay, here it comes. Another dramatic declaration of how much I'm his. But no. Instead, he dropped a bombshell that almost made me choke on my wine. I need to confess something, he began, his voice low, the CEO persona melting away for a rare moment. Okay, I said cautiously, half expecting him to announce he'd bought a private island, just to be extra dramatic. What now? Did you buy a zoo to win me over or something? Are we doing this now, Dominic? Because I swear to God, if you get more ridiculous than this, I've been in love with you for years, Sophie, he interrupted, looking completely dead serious. I froze, blinked, tried to process this new development. Wait, what? I said, laughing nervously, because surely he couldn't have just said that with a straight face. You, what? I've been watching you for years, he continued, completely unbothered by my confusion. Not in a creepy way, obviously, he added, as if that was supposed to make it less weird. But oh my God, I gasped, pressing my hand to my chest. Are you telling me you've been secretly stalking me for years? Like a CEO ninja lurking in the shadows of my life? No, not stalking, he insisted. Just, observing. Observing, I repeated slowly, eyeing him suspiciously. Right. Obsessed CEO watching me from across the room, kind of observing. He didn't laugh, just stared at me with that infuriatingly serious expression of his. I asked my father to choose me for the arranged marriage, because I knew this was my only chance to make you see me, to make you notice me, to show you who I really am. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. My mind was reeling, trying to comprehend this. The man I'd married, for business reasons, mind you, had been in love with me all along. Not because of the money, not because of the power, but because of me. I felt my face flush with embarrassment, confusion, and a strange sense of hope I hadn't expected. All the absurd dramatics, the twirling, the over-the-top monologues, the possessive declarations, all made sense now. It wasn't a game. It was his way of showing me how much he cared. Wait, I said, half laughing in disbelief. So all of this insane drama was because you've been pining after me for years? You've been acting like the hero of every ridiculous billionaire romance novel ever written, just to get me to notice you? Pretty much, he replied, deadpan. It seemed like the best way to win you over. You like a good story, don't you? I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so I did both. A weird mixture of giggles and sniffles. Oh my God, Dominic. You're insane. I know. But you're insane, he said, a touch of tenderness in his voice. For a moment, I just sat there processing it all. The grand gestures, the twisted CEO fantasies, the bizarre I'm the hero attitude. And then it hit me. Somehow, someway, I wasn't just tolerating this ridiculous man anymore. I was falling for him. So naturally, I did what any sane woman in my position would do. If we're going to make this marriage real, I said, my voice trembling slightly with both excitement and exasperation, you need to stop acting like a cheesy billionaire romance hero. He looked at me, unblinking. Wife, that's not possible. I am the drama. I stared at him, my mouth agape. Excuse me? I am the drama, he repeated, as if he were delivering some profound truth. You signed up for it. Now you have to deal with it. And just like that, everything clicked into place. All the chaos, the insane moments, the overly dramatic forced proximity tropes, it was all part of his plan. It had always been part of his plan. I took a deep breath, realizing that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't so opposed to it after all. Dominic wasn't just the man who twirled me around in a ballroom. He was also the man who loved me in his own, uniquely intense way. And I was starting to love him back. Epilogue, the happy ending, and more shenanigans. So here we are. Still married. Still trapped in this ridiculous, whirlwind romance. And yet, somehow, I wouldn't have it any other way. Dominic didn't stop acting like a romance hero, oh no. He went full throttle. After our little heart-to-heart, he bought an entire publishing house so he could personally edit all romance novels to fit his CEO standards. You know, the perfectly domineering, possessive, and over-the-top hero who always says exactly what's on his mind. Honestly, I don't even know if this is something I should be concerned about, or just let him have his fun. As for Aaron? Well, he's still in the hospital, nursing his broken ribs, and sulking about how his chance with me was ruined by a man who probably has a future as an action hero. Mia, bless her heart, has taken to teasing him mercilessly, because nothing says helping someone heal quite like a little friendly mockery. And Dominic? Well, he's still the overenthusiastic, dramatic CEO who thinks he's the hero of his own epic romance. But I've come to realize that, while he might live for the drama, I've found something real. Not the fantasy version he created in his head, but the real Dominic Archer, the man who loves me in his own hilariously intense, utterly ridiculous way. So yeah, maybe I've got a soft spot for my ridiculous, over-the-top CEO husband. And maybe, just maybe, I'm starting to think that drama, while it's ridiculous and excessive, and often unnecessary, is also exactly what I need. Because life with Dominic Archer will never be boring. And that, my friends, is the ultimate happily ever after. Whoa, and just for the record, he's still twirling me around at random moments. Some things never change. Story ends. Question: would you survive living with a CEO who treats every moment like a scene from a romance novel, or would you run for the hills? Let me know your thoughts.